Good day, Christine.
Hello. Nice to see you.
For the people who don't yet know who Christine is a health and wellness expert, yoga instructor, health and mindset coach, retired chiropractor, spiritual healer, and writer. Have I missed anything?
That is a lot. Yes, that's all of it. And YouTuber, new to YouTube.
And I will link Christine's YouTube channel to the description so you can check out her content after the podcast is over. And in your website's About Me section, I have read that you help people to explore thoughts and beliefs that form the pictures of their outer worlds.
Wow.
That is a very interesting statement. Could you help me unpack it?
Yeah, there is a lot of information contained in that one simple statement. What I discovered over my lifetime of practicing as a chiropractor, so helping people with their physical pain and physical health problems by helping to work on their bodies and consult with their diet and nutrition and exercise. Um, it became more and more apparent to me over the years that a major component of our physical health is our mind, our thoughts, our beliefs, and not only what's going on in the conscious mind, but what's going on in the subconscious mind. And we shouldn't ignore that when we're looking at our health. And so, while still absolutely, our diet, our exercise, proper sleep, these things are all pillars of a healthy lifestyle, we should not ignore what's going on between our ears. Our thoughts, our beliefs, our healing, our past emotional traumas and hardships, because that can really sometimes it's the cause of our physical ailments, but at the very least, it contributes to our physical health. And so that's why over the years, I sort of steered my practice more and more toward the thoughts and beliefs and the mental health aspect of helping people live happier, healthier lives.
Fantastic. And for a person that is not well read or well informed in the subjects of, let's say, mental hygiene or mental health, what could be some practices that a person could take onto himself in order
More.
to be healthy mentally?
Yeah, absolutely. And like any healthy habit, we see the most success. It's the least overwhelming. If you start with one basic small step and get that solid and then move on to another. So many people have had the experience of, maybe they want to lose some weight and they'll take drastic measures that really are impractical for maintaining over a lifetime, and then the weight just comes back on. Or if you're not a runner and you want to learn how to run a 10K or a marathon, you don't just get out there and run the 10Ks, you start small. So just take a moment to get quiet and ask yourself, what's one simple, tangible thing I could do to address my mental health to be happier and healthier? And the answer probably is inside of you and will come out very easily. One thing will bubble up, and it might be just having a little bit more quiet time, or it could be saying no to things that you want to say no to, but you tend to say yes to. What I could give dozens of examples, but see what bubbles up from your heart. What's one concrete thing I could start with and practice that one thing. And then when you feel good about that, get quiet and ask, okay, what could I do next? But I think that starts to train you to ask your body and your mind, what do you need from me? Rather than, we tend to get signals, but ignore them from our body or from our mind. So that's why I like people to begin.
Sometimes it seems that some people don't really want to address the issues that are making them feel bad. And let's say if you're a friend or a relative of such a person and you see the person suffering, it might make you suffer as well as a consequence. And you really want the person to help himself or herself in some kind of ways. So the question here is, why do you think some people don't want to make a change?
Uh-huh.
Or why do some people instead choose to stay the same,
Really?
even though it's painful, instead of trying to move away from it.
Right, right. Oh, if I had the answer to that, the world would be moving down my door. Back when I practiced chiropractic, we would have a saying, you can't want the patient to get better more than they want to get better. And, that's a difficult scenario that you raise because ultimately it always does come from within. Now, does it make it easier to have support and resources from the outside? Absolutely. But if without the desire for change coming from the inside, not a lot is going to change. And it's important to meet a person where they are. And so if the only thing they're ready for is to be spoon fed with baby steps, that's okay. That's what they're ready for. And you have to trust and have faith that when they're ready for the next steps, whether you're the person to help them with that or they find somebody else for help with that, it's important to nurture them where they are and for it to be non-judgmental, to have non-judgmental love for a person while you're supporting them in making the changes. There's a whole step in the science of change. And the very first step is the person has to be even willing to contemplate the change. And if the answer is no, there's really not a lot that can be done until they're willing to at least broach the possibility of change or that change is possible. And then there's going to be a phase of just thinking about it before they're ready to take an action step. And then they'll take an action step, but it has to be a first initial action step that they're ready for before they really will commit to it. And we just find there's not a lot of success with trying to jump in at step C when they haven't done step A yet.
Understandably. And maybe I have asked too many questions about people who are on the hard side of life at the moment,
Yeah.
because I believe that
Yeah.
health and wellness practices are not only for the people that are unhealthy or not well. They can also be for the people who are actually in a good health and in a good
Yeah,
condition in any
absolutely.
kind of regards.
Blood room.
And therefore, I know you have written two books regarding similar topics. One name is Happy Ever After and Hold This
Yeah.
Thought. Here they are.
Oh, well, Happy Ever After. And Happy Ever After is a book of short paragraphs designed to walk a person through and understanding what true happiness is that comes from the inside, the sort of happiness that isn't dependent on external circumstances like your next promotion or finding the love of your life or a certain amount of money or bigger house, the sort of happiness that can't be taken away from you because it's coming from who you are on the inside. And so walking people through small chapter by small chapter and what that is, what that looks like, what it feels like, how to cultivate it, as well as some practical advice on things to do and to not to do to help grow those happiness muscles. We all have them. You may feel, or some people may feel as if they've been very far detached from happiness or that those happiness muscles got very weak, but they can be strengthened. It is inside of you, just like we've had a lot of rain where I am this summer, but the sun is still behind those rain clouds. Your happiness is still in there, even when you are feeling at your lowest. And so what can we do to help, burn off that fog, burn off those clouds for the happiness to be experienced again? And also that, life has challenges and we won't feel, joy and elated 100% of the time. But that's, again, true happiness is a contentment, a satisfaction, a groundedness that is going to be within a character trait within the inside of you. And then the other really is a companion book. This is a companion journal, Hold That Thought, because it's very nice to go through this book one chapter per day because they are quite short and it leaves you with an affirmative thought. You can either focus on it that day or journal about it. And this has space for journaling on the thought of the day, just to get your your thoughts rolling, your some ideas from the subconscious mind to come out on that a thought of the day. So thank you for sharing the info about our books.
And from how the books are structured, it seems that the books are mainly made as a daily practice type of
Yeah,
books. So
yeah.
it seems like writing is a big part of the practice. So, how come writing is so powerful in order to grow those or regrow those happiness muscles?
Yeah, especially writing with our hands versus typing on a computer. Writing by hand in a notebook, on a journal, whether you save it or crumple it up and throw it away after, it really helps to get those some of those buried thoughts, buried feelings, subconscious thoughts out. It's not uncommon in our fast-paced society to be a little detached from our emotions, to have difficulty naming them or even understanding, you know, an emotion that might first feel like anger. If you dig down a little bit deeper, quite often it's fear or sadness or disappointment that's underneath it. And so writing and writing by hand in particular really helps to get the truth of what you're feeling out. And you'll have a lot of aha moments. And somehow writing on a piece of paper where nobody else is looking at it, nobody else can hear you, feels a little safer than speaking the words out loud quite often. It's just activating different sections of your brain and there's like a permission, a freedom to allow the word to flow through your hand versus coming out through the voice.
And the publication on Medium, because I have read quite a few of your articles there, and I have also submitted some of mine to your publication, Change Your Mind, Change Your Life.
Yeah.
And for whom is that publication, and who are the people that should try to support it by writing or otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, initially I want to say the publication is good for everybody, but particularly if you are the type of person that feels inspired to have personal growth, to be moving forward, to heal, whether it's physically or mentally or emotionally, to always be to continue to be the best version of yourself, but without not talking about the striving, there's nothing wrong with you. It's not like I'm broken and I need to be made better. It's just the way you would fertilize the plants in your garden to get the most beautiful blossoms on your flower or the most vegetables. It's food, it's for your thoughts, for your soul, for your health, to live your best, happiest, healthiest life. And so the content there are articles on physical health and wellness, like fitness and nutrition and taking care of your physical body. There's articles, typical self-help type articles, learning new skills, better communication skills, relationship skills. There's an element of spirituality, like nurturing the spiritual sides of ourselves, whether we participate in religion or not, but just nurturing relationship with a higher being, and awful lot on mindset, cultivating a more positive mindset, learning to challenge limiting beliefs, overcoming traumatic memories. So all under one umbrella to take care of your mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health.
Well, you have mentioned two words, which is spirituality and religion.
Mhm.
And I wonder whether for you they are synonyms,
Mhm.
or are they alluding to different kind of experiences, different kind of states of minds?
Right, right. In my mind, the words are not synonyms because I look at when I hear the word religion, I hear a denomination that has a very much a human element in it because most religious denominations have rules, and the rules vary from religion to religion. And in my mind, rules are man-made. Rules are made by humans. When I think of the word spirituality, I think of that inner relationship with a higher being, whatever you choose to call it. Because one thing that most of the major religions of the world agree upon is that we are a reflection of God or a higher being or the divinity, and that we have a little spark of that divine within us. And when I think of spirituality, I think of connecting with that spark of the divine within and having, and then you certainly can be both. I mean, religion is an avenue for expressing and expanding your spirituality, or you can study and have a very private relationship with your higher being without going to a building or following the specific rules of a particular denomination.
So one, as you have said, is more in a way outwardly bound in terms of ritual and practice and
Oh,
ceremony and
one.
something that differentiates one group from another in some regards.
Uh-huh.
So that could we could call maybe as an organized form
Yeah.
of spirituality.
Yeah.
And then the other one is more personal, more individualistic, more experienced directly, maybe without a medium. No pun intended. And both have a role in the world.
Sure.
And although they are kind of alluding to a little bit of a different qualitative experience,
Mhm.
because in my mind, you can be spiritual without having to accord to a specific religion.
Okay.
As well, you can be according to a specific religion but not be spiritual. So it's fairly complicated in some regards. And how important is spirituality to the wellness of a person?
Right. Well, I do believe that spirituality is one of the major pillars of a healthy lifestyle. You know, our physical health, our emotional health, our mental health, our social health, our relationships. And I do think that spirituality is also one of those pillars. Not everybody agrees with that, and that's perfectly fine with me. It's very important for me. I find that the more that I nurture and exercise my spiritual practices, the more centered I feel, the more grounded I feel, the more trust, or like the less fear or anxiety there is in my life. It's very calming. You know, life in the material world just on its own can be very distracting, very fast, very intense. And I like to balance that with the calming, the grounding, the bringing it all back in, to have that balance. Otherwise, it becomes very stressful in my mind and contributes to a lot of the health problems and unhappiness that people so commonly suffer from.
And what are some of your practices? Because you have mentioned spiritual practices, and I know there's a multitude of them, but for you personally, what has worked, or what do you feel that is your expression of spirituality?
Well, it's definitely a hybrid practice that's unique to me that I've, just developed over the years. And I've always been, even though I don't necessarily belong to an organized religion, they've always fascinated me. So I've studied many of them and read many spiritual texts for Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism. And they all have a lot in common, but I like to draw the wisdom from these texts. And I do this day practice yoga and meditation. And yoga is a very spiritual practice. Yoga is very much more than the stretches and exercises we do on our mats. It's a very Western interpretation of yoga. But when you go back and study the ancient texts and the wisdom and philosophies that have been handed down, it's a very spiritual practice. So most days of the week, I start the day with some breath work, some gentle movement, just to time breathing with motion, with calming my mind, and then spend some time in quiet meditation. Occasionally, I will use mantra, and I consider prayer when I speak or ask things of my higher source. And I consider meditation when I get quiet and just try to listen or just spend time side by side in that quietness with the divine or with a version of me that resides deep inside and has a little more wisdom than my human mind.
As you have said, that spark.
Yeah, the spark.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it seems that every person has it, but maybe not everyone recognizes it or doesn't feel like it's important to recognize
Right.
that aspect of your own self. And it is very interesting how different people relate to the subject.
Yeah.
Because even hearing the word spirituality or meditation, people start thinking like, oh, we're in the area of woo woo,
Oh, yeah.
so to say.
Yeah.
I think this also touches upon another subject that I wanted to talk about with you because uh, me being a student of sociology and anthropology in university, and I wrote a bachelor actually about religion. So I studied religion in the anthropological sense. I was very interested in nature-based religions, so to say. And one major question that I had in my mind is what are the values on which our society is predicated, and what kind of states of minds are sought for and, well, encouraged? And in a way, from my analysis, it came to be that we are very focused on the alert problem solving mode of the
For,
mind,
yes.
which is which predominates other every other states of mind. So um, and maybe in some regard that is the reason why people with various, so to say, mental disorders or other states of mind are also seen as someone who might be potentially dangerous or something to
No.
someone to pity. But in other societies, the same people could have been seen as spiritual leaders, shamans, healers, and so on.
No.
So what I wanted to ask you, I know that you also work with subjects relating to people with ADHD and autism.
Um,
And could you a little bit expand on what is autism and ADHD, and how do people with these conditions see the world and relate to it?
yeah. Well, thank you for asking because we still are learning so much about ADHD and autism and other what's termed neurodivergent conditions. Neurodivergent just means that the brain is wired and works a little bit differently from what would be called typical. Now, we still don't have great words to describe these things because it does leave you feeling like one is normal and one is not. But I like to describe it like this. To have a neurodivergent brain, some people are right-handed dominant and some people are left-hand dominant. I believe it's about 80 or 85% of the world are right-hand dominant, so far fewer people are left-handed. But it doesn't mean that's abnormal. It just means there are far fewer people who are left-handed than right-handed. And because our physical world is designed for people who use their right hand, some people who are left-handed struggle with some things. It's a little more difficult for them to write neatly on a piece of paper. They might struggle to use a can opener or a pair of scissors, but it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. So having ADHD or being on the autism spectrum is very similar to that. And I am both. I was diagnosed as an adult with ADHD and also on the autism spectrum. So I'm an example of the diversity in the neurodivergent population because different people can be affected less severely, more severely. I have managed to structure and create what appears to be a very typical, Western lifestyle. But that doesn't mean that I don't struggle with things. And this is another reason why I'm so fascinated with studying the brain, studying our mindset, and studying spiritual and relaxation practices that affect our brains. Because people who are neurodivergent tend to have, for lack of a better word, the part of your brain that controls the fight or flight is just amped up a little bit higher in the neurodivergent brain. Part of it is wiring, how you were born, but part of it probably is learned over time as well, because people on the spectrum or with ADHD tend to be more sensitive to the information coming in from our worlds, lights, sounds, activity, motion, vibration, you name it. So our brains are getting bombarded with a lot of information, and we lack in the ability to filter out the unnecessary information. So it really can overwhelm the brain, which then sends it into fight or flight because it's so overwhelmed. So there is, some of it is learned behavior and some of it is how we are wired. So this is why things like writing, meditation, gentle exercise like yoga, walking, swimming, Pilates, dancing can be so helpful for the neurodivergent mind, just calming it down, stimulating the opposite side of the nervous system, stimulating your parasympathetic nervous system, which controls rest and digest, versus the sympathetic, which is fight or flight. So helping to bring more balance to that nervous system and better, like recovery of, at the end of the day when you're just exhausted from all the sensory input that you've been experiencing. So I like to gear my teaching, not exclusively, but be very inclusive of people who are not neurodivergent, just because I know how much these practices can help them.
And how common is it? Is it a common thing? Because I also have heard that everyone is on a spectrum
Right.
in terms of, let's say, autism or
Yeah.
ADHD. Just as you have said, for some people,
Right.
it's a little bit tuned up, and maybe for some people, in the opposite way, it's too much tuned down.
Yeah.
So how can we see it in terms of the commonality of it?
Right. I've read differing information, so I don't have a concrete answer for you. I've read anywhere from 1% to 15% of the population. And because it's a spectrum and some people are only minimally affected while others are severely affected, where's the limit? When do you stop counting people? And there's still so much they're trying to learn, because there's still a stigma today that women don't have ADHD or autism, but it's not true. It's just that the way medical research has always been done, they only studied boys and then they only studied men, and they're just starting to study women, and they're discovering it's just as common for women. It might display a little bit differently, but it's just as common. So I don't have a concrete answer for you, but it's enough that everybody has a family member or a friend who would be neurodivergent. I'm certain of that. And yes, while every human can struggle with some of the sensory processing issues that neurodivergent people have, I don't think it's the same as being on that neurodivergent spectrum, because if it doesn't impact what you can do and can't do in your life, if it hasn't become possibly even a disability, then I wouldn't consider it as being part of the spectrum.
Understood. So that's a good framing of it, because it's just like when you have a certain kind of disease or a pain in your body and you Google it and you immediately get cancer, like, or the second worst condition that you might be in. So yes, not everyone who is sensitive could have a neurodivergent situation happening.
Yeah.
And but for the people who do, what do you think about how our society is structured in order to include them in the daily life of, well, however our societies are running?
Right. It's not very good. Not very
Not very good.
Yeah, I've made a couple of blogs and videos about this. People with ADHD and or on the autism spectrum tend to experience more traumas growing up and in their lives. They tend to be bullied more, or even if they're not bullied, it's because there can be a difficulty in their caregivers understanding what the child needs, that even in the most loving environment, those needs just might not be met because, people are doing the best they can. They just didn't have an awareness. And again, and then even in adulthood, extroversion is so applauded as being preferable to introversion, but I think that's really just a silly bias that there's no, data or logic behind it. And in people, you're just perceived as different or odd. I have a threshold as to how many conversations I can hold at the same time, and it becomes
Mm.
very overwhelming. And I just might need to get up from the table and go do the dishes instead, or back away, or go talk to one person instead of talking to 5 person people, which in our society could be looked at as being aloof or rude or bad manners. But I'm really just doing it because my brain is like overload and I just need to give it a little bit of a rest. So this is why I think awareness is so important, and also why I talk about it so freely. I mean, there's no I don't hold back from talking about it because there's no part of me that feels ashamed by it, or that I'm, less worthy because of it. And then by helping not only people on the spectrum, or not only neurodivergent people, but neurotypical people, just to understand, so that instead of thinking, well, that person's rude, they just walked away, might have more compassion or understanding, like, okay, they've had enough. We all need a break sometime. It's not personal. It's not intended to be bad behavior, but it just might look different. And just to accept people's differences, and then understand we're all doing the best we can with the resources that we have, and just to be a little more kind and compassionate about that.
And for people who have a child with a neurodivergent mind, uh, maybe two questions regarding these children. One is how to recognize if your son or daughter has a neurodivergent mind, because I used to work in schools, and I used to teach English, and I used to teach kids as well. And some kids were diagnosed with some kind of condition, and some kids were not. But from relating to them, you can see that there's something happening
Mhm.
which is not so typical. So, one question is how to recognize that your child has a neurodivergent mind, and the other one, what kind of education, what kind of measures should be taken in order for him to be the best of himself? Because we also know that people with autism are greatly gifted. They tend to develop very unique skills if they are trained and helped to develop themselves in the right way.
Yeah.
So how can parents do that?
Yeah, good question. I do want to state I'm not qualified to make diagnoses, or to teach somebody how to diagnose someone. But what I would recommend is, if somebody with more understanding about it than you, like a teacher or a doctor or a mental health practitioner, or maybe a parent of a neurodivergent child, points things out to you, it's very almost an instinct, a natural reaction as a parent to resist that, to
Mhm.
discount it, because there are some common signs and symptoms. And also a Google search or a YouTube search will show you lists of them, like, toe walking, rituals, stimming with holding things in their hands, temper tantrums are often an autistic meltdown, not a temper tantrum. Not always, seeming like they don't hear you when they call your name. There's a lot of clues, but parents often will just make excuses for them. And as hard as it is, and both of my children are neurodivergent in different ways, as hard as it is to accept that we all want the best for our kids, and the sooner you can get help, the better it is for your child, um, just from a neurodevelopmental point of view, and to teach them coping skills to get through the parts that are difficult, to help them reach their fullest potential, to help nurture the special gifts that they do have. And then also as a parent, to help learn how to best deal with the difficult parts that can come with it, any challenging behaviors that can come with it. If your kid needed eyeglasses, they would be at a disadvantage at school if you didn't send them to school with their eyeglasses. They wouldn't be able to see the board. They wouldn't be able to read things. And having them wear glasses would make a huge difference. And it's really no different from that. You know, if your child has ADHD or is on the autism spectrum, giving them whatever accommodation that they need is like the accommodation of wearing eyeglasses. If you need eyeglasses, it might mean a little bit more time to take tests. It might mean written instructions versus audible instructions. So it's just giving them the support that they need to perform their best and succeed. I forgot what part two of the question was. You might have to repeat that.
No, that actually answers my question well, but it raises another question. When we think about general education at schools, let's say maybe it would be best to first talk about the US because that's where you're at
Yeah.
and where you have been born and lived most of your life, I
Yeah.
believe. Because I'm coming from a situation that in our country, um, the government decided to close the schools for the people with special needs
Oh,
and just put everyone in the general education.
okay. Well,
And and I, as a teacher, was a little bit appalled by the circumstance. And it's not because I stigmatize the kids.
we-
I just realized that they need extra attention and extra help, and to put everyone in the same wagon
right.
for one teacher, especially if there are no helpers,
Uh-huh.
is terrible. Like there's so much divergency in every kind of way in a classroom, and then we need more personnel to actually work.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes one decision has been made and not the other.
Wow.
So, I a little bit fear for what's going to happen afterwards. But maybe in the US, it's not the same. How does the education system deal with that in your country?
Okay, well, answer to the best of my ability because I'm not an education expert or specialist. And my children have outgrown the public school system now at this point. But the US did do something similar many decades ago, except for the most severe of needs. They tried to integrate the public schools so that you did have children with special learning needs in with children that didn't seem to have special learning needs, with the intention that maybe some of the classes are fully integrated, but then maybe there are some classes specifically designed for certain learning
Mm.
challenges, and also more aids and assistance to help with children that needed it, with the belief that, excuse me, that the integration was better than being separate. And I do know that my older son did very much benefit from like integrated preschool, and then beyond preschool, then just kind of graduated into the standard curriculum. Um, there are people much smarter and more experienced than I am to know if that was the right approach or not. And then in the US, um, probably get some hate comments on this video for this. But the US, it really depends on what state you happen to be lucky enough to be born in, because some of the states have very strong public education that is competitive with European and Asian public school education. Other states have very poor public education with very little funding, very little money and resources for anything outside of what they can provide, the most basics. So unfortunately, in the US, it sort of depends on the state that you were born in. And I'm very grateful that my children, grew up in the state where I raised them, because they had phenomenal schools and continue to. But sadly, that's not the case for every kid in the US.
Sadly, it most of it actually boils down to funding.
It boils down to
So
funding. Absolutely. Yeah.
definitely, because in our country, the schools were closed for the same reason, because of lack of funding and lack of investments, and yeah, yeah, education is extremely important, but unfortunately, it's not always treated as that. Well, anyways, moving away from this subject, what could be some? I wouldn't say the most basic, but the most tangible and priority wise important pillars of health in your mind? Would it be, let's say, meditation, healthy eating, good sleep, or how would you structure that most priority wise important basics for a person to have?
Right. Well, it's hard to remove a pillar and have the structure stay strong. So the pillars are all very important: your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, spiritual, um, your diet and nutrition. So they are all very important. I think to give you the quick answer on that, I still think of the mind and your mindset sort of like an umbrella that goes over all of those pillars, because as your mindset improves, you're naturally drawn. With a healthy mind, you're naturally drawn to healthy eating. With a healthy mind, you're naturally drawn to wanting to move your body, however moving your body gives you joy, whatever particular form. When you're in your top mental health, you're naturally inclined to want to have a level of social engagement with other people. So I like to have that be like the linchpin of all the rest. And then again, just my biggest bit of advice is no matter what pillar you're talking about, ask yourself, what is that one solid, concrete thing that I can do? Maybe it's drink a few more glasses of water each day. Maybe it's walk more or get, 20 minutes of physical exercise in a day. Maybe it's making sure you have 10, 15 minutes of quiet time, whether it be meditation or prayer or just sitting in nature. What's one concrete thing that you can do to just take your health? If you give yourself a score of a 7 out of 10, what's that one thing you could do that would take it to a 7.5 or an 8? And then when you've got that practice solid, move on to one more thing. If you're feeling like you're not at your peak level of health right now, that didn't happen overnight. It happened very gradually over time. And so getting our health back, while you can start right now, or if you kind of fall off the wagon, you can always get it right back on it instantly. You're going to build your health up gradually, just the way it declines gradually. And be patient with that and give yourself credit for the efforts that you make. And it's just, we're always moving forward. Just keep on that path of making healthy choices and doing things that are good for your mind and your body and your spirit.
Wonderful. Very, very good advice. And what is yet to come for Christine? What are your plans for the future? Are you working on something special? And what are people to look forward to?
Thank you for asking. Well, I do continue to write and publish my blog articles at the Change Your Mind, Change Your Life publication over on Medium. Medium is a platform where a lot of bloggers will put their writing, and it is just a wealth of amazing resources over there. No matter what you're looking for, you can find it over there in Medium. And that's how you and I met. And
Exactly.
place. And then I have a relatively new YouTube channel that's just getting off the ground now, with similar themes of health, wellness, mindset, spirituality. Short videos as short as 7 or 15 seconds to long form videos. I have a few interviews like this where I sit down with people, and perhaps you'll honor me with sitting in the opposite chairs and letting me interview you one day. Some interviews, I've got some yoga and meditation, mindset, and then also a section on the neurodivergent autism, just answering a lot of questions on what it's like for the neurodivergent mind, and all geared to help you live your most happiest, healthiest life.
That is wonderful. And I believe that it would be also great to jump on the call once again in the future and maybe have a specific episode solely addressing the neurodivergent minds, because it's such a broad topic.
Wow.
And as you have said, new things are coming out of the scientific field constantly because it's so fresh, and it has been limited in the past, and now more and more research. I didn't even know that women were not tested or researched in the past.
Yeah.
So this is from one standpoint, it's actually crazy, but from another standpoint, it's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, good point. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I would love to have this conversation specifically dedicated for that. So maybe it would be something for the people to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, thank you. It's a wonderful idea. We covered a lot of territory today. And I thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.